I just want to say a few words about the Chesed committee. First of all, I'm Debbie Pearlstein, in case I don't know you. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Chesed committee, and that's the committee here at Brotherhood that looks to take care of our fellow members when people are in times of need. So we are a resource. We have a lot of information on our website. We have materials in the library. We have referrals on the times. So we are there to help people when they have needs. We often are most active when there's a death in the community, helping with shiva or funeral arrangements or things like that. And sometimes we come to be identified as this pity that you call when there's a death in a question and we get involved in many other occasions in the community's lives. We help get people to and from medical procedures. We visit people if they're isolated at home. We visit people in hospitals and in rehab. We even at this time of year help people out if their local stores don't have any for their Passover shopping. So I would encourage people to check our website. Call us if you have ideas about things that you think we can help with in the community. Please let us know. And I want to draw your attention to a couple of things on the tables that reflect some of the things we worked on. One of them, which is coordinated with Friday night's speaker about organ transplantation, just a little information sheet about donating organs to get yourself registered on the list, because that's something not only Brotherhood members need, but members of the rest of our community need. The other two sheets of paper are emergency information sheets. The bigger one is to post somewhere in your home, and the little one is to carry in your wallet. I'm one of those people who has been neglectful of that, but now I have one in my wallet, and it has, God forbid, you'll hit by a bus scenario. It has the information on who should be called, and there's all that information. Encourage people to take them. If you run out, just let me know, and I've got some others upstairs. And if you wish the synagogue to have a record of who your emergency contact is, we can do that and put it in our record, so if anything happens in the synagogue, it's a call. We know who to reach out to for your friends. So that's the Chesed committee. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for supporting us with your time and your energy and your donations. And I'm going to turn it over right now to Rabbi Hall.
I want to thank the Chesed Committee for sponsoring this program and inviting me to make some introductory remarks. Chesed, which is often translated into English as love or loving kindness, may be better understood as grace in English. Rabbi Rami Shapiro, in his book Amazing Chesed, defines it as God's unlimited, unconditional, unconditioned, all-inclusive love for all creation. So let's unpack that definition one word at a time. To say that God's grace is unlimited is to say that there is no one outside its reach. No one. Not the sinner, not the heretic, the unbeliever, or the differently believing believer. To say that God's grace is unconditional is to say that there is nothing one can do to merit grace or even avoid grace. Neither doing mitzvot nor affirming a particular creed will bring you closer to God's grace. Similarly, you cannot get more or less grace. You can only get all of grace. The difference between sinner and saint isn't the quality or the quantity of grace they receive, but what they do with what they get. To say that God's grace is unconditioned, is to say that Chesed is not restricted by human notions of good and bad, just and unjust, the desirable and the undesirable. Chesed is the fullness of God's infinite love, bestowed without filters upon all creation. Think in terms of the sun and sunlight. There are times when the sunlight heals, and times when the sunlight kills. Times when sunlight illumines, and times when sunlight blinds. The sun doesn't decide when to shine one way and when to shine another. It doesn't decide who will warm and who will burn. It just shines. What we do with the sunlight we receive is up to us. Receiving it is not. When we say God's grace is all-inclusive, we mean to summarize and emphasize the points just made. Chesed includes everyone and everything. There is no one who is left out of God's grace, and nothing that does not come from God's grace. When we say love, don't imagine a romantic love or even a contractual love. The love we are talking about here isn't quid pro quo, this for that. God's love isn't earned or merited, it is just given. But what is given isn't always what is desired. If love is about giving unto others what they would like to receive, God's love is giving unto others everything that can be received, whether they would like to receive it or not. In short, God's grace is the giving of all to all. This way of understanding grace draws upon the Kabbalistic notion that, in Yiddish, alles ist Gott. All is God. God is the sole reality, the source and substance of all things. There is nothing outside of God, for if there were, then God would no longer be infinite. And a finite God isn't the God of Judaism. God is the infinite source of existence. God is that from whom and in whom all things rise and in whom all things return. And grace is this rising and returning, existence itself as each of us experiences it. You cannot control existence. All you can do is learn to work with it, to navigate God's grace in such a way as to live graciously, with a sense of acceptance, compassion, and tranquility. And this is where Judaism as a spiritual practice comes in. When grace is seen as essential to life, Judaism becomes a way to live graciously. Mitzvot are no longer means of pleasing God or earning rewards in this life or in some other life to come, but the means for working with the grace of God in ways that benefit life and the living. And Jewish holy days are no longer just expressions of our history, but vehicles for navigating the grace of God in a manner that brings us into ever more mindful and compassionate relation with the life within us and the lives around us. I'm going to call now on Brother Mann.
Thank you, Rabbi Alter. Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Aliza Scharf-Bendow, who's a licensed clinical social worker, a psychotherapist, a Kabbalistic healer in private practice in New York City. Aliza, I'm going to read just from the summary that you have, but Aliza utilizes her training in family therapy and hypnosis and her holistic approach to health and healing and work with her clients. She has published a Jewish Holiday Reader, Lessons on Healing from a Psychotherapist's Perspective, in addition to various articles on spirituality and psychotherapy. It's my privilege to know Aliza for, I think, probably close to 20 years. It's hard to imagine. And to have invited her here to speak with us today. So we're going to be listening and join me in welcoming her as she speaks about living well, fully present.
What a welcoming crowd. And can you hear me okay? A little louder? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I usually take a moment when I first stand up in front of a room. I just want to let folks know this is being recorded. So I want people to be aware of that when it says being recorded. Okay? Also, thank you to the rabbi for that incredible opening. I actually really felt an energetic opening, just speaking about Chesed, which really is what this work is about. Kabbalistically, we actually work a great deal with Chesed in some of the healings that we do, and we hold Chesed in relationship to what's on the other side of the tree of life, as we refer to it, is Gevura, which is strength. You can think of it as a boundary. All Chesed needs a container in order for it to exist. It needs a house, so to speak. And I was really thinking, as the rabbi was talking about Chesed and loving kindness, how Brotherhood Synagogue really is such an incredible container for that loving kindness. I felt it when I really walked into the synagogue. I was sharing that with you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. I usually start by just giving you a few snippets of my background that helps me come into the room a little bit more deeply, a little bit more fully. How I really came to this work, many things, but some of the big factors has to do with my own family history. My mother is a convert to Judaism, where I was born. My father grew up very distant from his Judaism, and they came back to it on their own. I grew up in a very traditional, observant home that fed a deep and authentic quest of spirituality within me. As I became an adult, I really was seeking a spiritual path that felt authentic and applied. I did try soul spiritual study, and that wasn't quite for me. I really landed in my spiritual home when I embarked on my training to become a psychotherapist. And many years later, I found this healing modality, integrative Kabbalistic healing, a big fancy name for deep healing, wholeness work, essentially. Okay. Finally, I'll share part of my spiritual journey and path right now is really as a wife and a mother. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary, and 3 wonderful children, ages 7.5 to 4.5 months. Yeah. Yes. So let me try and organize this a little bit by talking about the goals for today. I was really thinking about what I want to bring in, what I want to be taken home today. It's really essentially about what it means to live fully present as a human being, both healing and growing through our imperfections, and at times, our pain and suffering. I'm going to speak a little bit about what it means Kabbalistically, bring a bit of intro into Kabbalistic thought and how it helps us to live each day more fully. And finally, I want to include the concept of tikkun olam, translated as the repair of the world, or as we are referring to it here today, being a person committed to the healing of the world. Okay? I'm actually going to dive right in and open up the concept of tikkun olam. So the term tikkun olam actually has 2 main sources in Judaism and Jewish thought. One is the Mishnah, which is the Jewish oral tradition, and it really refers to tikkun olam as actual social doctrine or law around caring for the vulnerable in the community. It's a series of concrete ways we're supposed to behave. The second, which is really what we're going to be going into more deeply, is the Kabbalistic tradition of tikkun olam, which talks about the repair of the world through spiritual elevation. And it specifically talks about returning that which is shattered or broken back to its source. Anybody who's read Kabbalistic text, there's a lot of language around what's shattered, okay, and broken. And we want to be in very direct connection to that. So I understand this and use its meaning here today through the language of integration. And I wrote that in caps in my notes. It's really about integration, right? Integrative Kabbalistic healing. A way of returning that which is shattered simply by gathering up and including all of the broken pieces. I essentially think of all healing as a process of finding wholeness through an inclusion of all of the pieces of who we are, including, of course, those precious broken pieces. And I'm going to go back to that that's really, in my view, the main theme today, and I hope that will be taken home, that we are all whole. Life is whole, and that our healing is to include all that is and all of who we are. It is through this conscious attitude that we find our way home, back to our truest nature, back to God, back to reality. And yes, this is how we heal the world. I'm going to dive right into some Kabbalistic healing text, and then I'm going to bring an applied meditation, okay, to help us really get experientially seated in this. Whether you are conscious of it or not, life is intrinsically whole. Life has many problems. We could make a list. Life is unfair. Life is confusing. Life is painful. Life is too short. But please do not add to this true and penetrating list of life's problems the idea that life is not of one piece, that life is not whole. If you can hold in your mind the truth that life is whole at exactly the same time, that you recognize the validity of the list of life's problems, life will suddenly seem much more manageable and alive. This is a mysterious thing, that life should contain all of life's problems as part of its wholeness. We have trouble understanding this wholeness because we look at life as if it were not part of life, as if we are not part of life, but only an observer of life. Please begin to think of life as a single thing. Life is not the sum of its parts. Life is a single thing. Take a moment. Just invite everybody to take a couple of deep breaths. We're going to transition into a meditation. Okay. Few deep breaths. Center yourself. You can feel your seat underneath you. Okay, everybody can participate at whichever level they feel comfortable, but the experiential piece really does help a deeper seatedness in this work. So let's begin by just sitting quietly and breathe for a few minutes. Say to yourself, there is no life but this one. There are not two lives, one with and one without God. This doesn't mean that things will remain the same. My life will continue to change and transform. But right here and now, I am willing to accept, to be with, to receive my life as it is, right here, right now. As you allow yourself to do this, to enter into this moment, this time and place, also let yourself know, even if only a little, that it is by being here that you enter into the place where God helps us change what we need to change and simultaneously be with life as it is. As you allow yourself to do this dance of change and acceptance, which is ongoing, takes place here, now, in the present moment. And slowly, allow yourself to open your eyes. And just make a mental note of what this was like for you. Keeping in mind there's no right or wrong experience. Just taking notes of what this was like for you to include life as it is right here, right now. Okay? Take a moment. I'm going to transition back into some of the lecture piece of this. Just taking notes. When we think about this in Jewish terms, what comes to mind for me is actually the concept of tshuva, or what is repentance, literally translated as return, meaning to come back to our original wholeness. It is not to become better as if we were not good, but to return to who we are in our deepest core. I actually have a whole chapter in my book dedicated to that, but I'll leave that at that for now. We're here today. So I'm going to move on to what are called a series of seed passages. They're essentially little sentences that we work with in my healing work. Okay, I think of them as precious food for thought and certainly nourishment for the soul. I ask you open your hearts and minds to these concepts and ideas that live in our bodies and experiences in the world. I will also give a bit more background in Kabbalistic healing in order to better understand the foundations of which these passages are built. We are all familiar with the suffering and challenges of a human life, and are no longer willing or able to hide from it, at least not exclusively or completely. Some of you I spoke to on the side, some of you are involved in various types of healing, intention work, mindfulness practice, and many have done a lot of other types of spiritual work. And for some, this may be new territory. So how might a non-dual Kabbalistic healing approach help us here today? I'm going to just take a brief moment to describe some of my background as a Kabbalistic healer and what the work is essentially about. Non-dual Kabbalistic healing is a healing modality based on the founder, who was a personal teacher of mine, Jason Schulman. His deep sights into the non-dual nature of reality. I translate non-dual as the holding of opposites, the relationship of opposites. This work integrates 13th century Kabbalistic wisdom, Buddhist thought, the latest theories in quantum physics, 20th and now 21st century psychological insight, and teachings of non-duality into deeply transformative healing modality. I've been a therapist, a psychotherapist for over 12 years now, and a Kabbalistic healer for about 8 years of that. And yes, I truly find it that transformative. It is a path of integrating work on the personal self, with all of its suffering and beauty, known as the relative world in which we all live in, along with learning how to awaken to and reside in the spaciousness of the absolute. Basically, it works with who we are as an individual, as a part of the whole of creation. Again, in a very applied, lived way. Take a moment, everybody just take a moment to think about what deep questions you might be bringing in today. What deep questions might you have? I'll throw out a few examples. Everybody has their phone, but questions like, why do good people suffer? What is my purpose? Or if you're anybody entering into a new phase of life, what is my purpose now? That reevaluation process. So what are some of your deep questions? In Kabbalistic healing, we're deeply interested in your questions, not just in having answers. Questions about life, God, reality, take us deeper and deeper into relationship with ourselves, others, and the world. When we stop at answers alone, they often limit us in our work of healing. I'll even add Chesed, the quality of Chesed, loving kindness. It actually supports this ongoing questioning. Question-answer has more to do with solid structure. So the quality of Chesed actually holds a space for this deep questioning where we're not necessarily just trying to arrive at an answer. In true non-duality, we understand that a fish never leaves the water. The fish never comes to the end of the water, even if it is an explorer fish, swimming this way and that. It never comes to the end of the ocean because its nature is to be in the water. The fish and the water are one. As long as we think, here I am whole and there I am not, we think there is an end to the ocean of self. but truly there is no end to the ocean. From the perspective of this passage, God, or reality, is the ocean, and we are the fish. To borrow a definition from Wikipedia, non-dualism is the idea that things appear distinct while not being separate. My example for that is if you think of a face, distinct eyes, nose, mouth, but it is one whole face. So we can kind of relate to both, just depending on how you look at it. Actually, a lot like those pictures, those trick pictures, you can see it different ways. Reality is so whole. It even contains duality within its singleness. Think of a coin. There's the head side, the tail side, but it is one coin. This is a profound truth that we have a great deal of difficulty living fully in our daily lives. The appearance of our lives often seems to deny this. Often God has become something perhaps external to us, not something we can fully relate to and completely separate from our human life and our perceptions of the world around us. We expend a great deal of effort trying to protect ourselves in our separateness, treating ourselves as an object, watching out for anything that can hurt us in some way. Usually this comes in the form of other human beings, nature, the world itself, even God. So we live our lives mistrusting ourselves and our fundamental nature, as well as mistrusting reality as a whole. It's a bit like walking around in the world, not being connected to the reality that gravity holds and supports us. Okay, we all live in relationship. We are part of something bigger. There is this whole that we are a part of. And at the same time, we have become a society of seekers of God, seekers of wholeness, seekers of happiness. So we live from both this separated place, but we also have that tshuva, that return, that yearning to come back to a wholeness. We have both ends of the consciousness. We are seekers of happiness, seekers of joy, seekers of pleasure, and are not in relationship to life as it is right now appearing. I think of this as having a case often of the shoulds or the should-haves, or I wish it was different. Okay, pay attention to those subtleties. When we are in our suffering, why couldn't it just be this way? Or we attempt to reach God by trying to purify or transcend our ego personality. And we can find this a lot in religion, I believe, when it's not used in the right way. Thinking of ourselves perhaps as bad in some way, or in order to heal, we have to be better than we are. This is absolutely the opposite perspective. We are with ourselves exactly as we are at a given moment. And this is actually the mechanism for true change and fluidity. When we resist that, we actually become stagnant and still in where we are, because we're not paying attention to something that exists. From this perspective, God is only in the transcendent, empty, or absolute. This is when we're trying to be better. Nature of reality, and not in the incredibly wonderful, messy, complicated, temporary, and ordinary human life. I just want to point out the Jewish belief that there is absolute sacredness in the mundane. Okay, we don't have that split. We do hold the mundane, seemingly mundane acts as sacred. As much as Chesed is, actually. It's absolutely sacred. This continual questioning often becomes the problem it was trying to resolve. We end up creating additional suffering for ourselves by reinforcing the illusion that God is somewhere else other than where we are, right here, right now. There is no life but this one. There are not two lives, one better than the other. Again, the shoulds or coulds. True change begins with a relationship with what is actually present in the now. Okay, I'll just quickly note the Hebrew word for change. Again, this is another chapter in my book on Rosh Hashanah. The word for change is lishanot, which comes from the same language, lishnot, shana, year, Rosh Hashanah, which has to do with repetition. And it has a cyclical nature. Anybody ever felt like they're on that hamster wheel sometimes? You go over the same problems over and over again, or we find ourselves in the same situations, repeating the same relationship patterns, what have you. That's actually where change is found. It's in coming back to these same places and having maybe our eyes a little bit more open and relating to it in a very present and real way. It's not that we don't need to work on ourselves, we do. It also doesn't mean that things will remain the same, that our pain will continue exactly as it is forever. The nature of life is that life is continually transforming and changing. Okay, again, Shana, the new year, is all about change, the Shanot. We can learn to work on ourselves in a way that doesn't simply continue the falsehood of believing that we need to become more perfect, more awake, more realized, or whatever we tell ourselves. And then, and only then, can we be with God. Just as the fish lives in the water, we live in God. It is our nature to be with God, as it is the fish's nature to be in the water. The fish and the water are one, as we are one with God. There is no beginning or end to being with God. God is the ultimate container, or as we often say, the ultimate come as you are party. I'd like to pause and just take a moment to survey the room if there are any questions up until this point. I'll have time at the end as well. I just wanted to check in before I move on.
There's one here.
Sure.
You said something about the mundane is sacred also, and yet you make a distinction between the days of the week, the ordinary days, and Shabbat, the sacred and the ordinary. And you used to have a ceremony, Havdalah. So how does those two views fit together?
So that's an awesome question. I love that. And actually that really brings in the point of non-dualism. We actually hold the holy days and the mundane days. That's the Yemei Kodesh and Yemei Chol. We hold them both as sacred. They both have their purpose. We need both. The word for holy, Kodesh, actually translates as designated. These are days that are designated for a separate purpose, a distinct purpose. Okay, I think that's sometimes maybe where the misconception comes in, that spirituality is about how many times a day you pray or how often you go to synagogue or what have you, but it's really not. It's a combination essentially of all that is, which includes the absolutely mundane, walking your child to preschool or helping somebody across the street. We really believe in that elevation of seeing the mundane or the Yemei Chol, the weekdays, so to speak. Okay. Thank you. It's a great question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm trying to keep an open, peaceful mind while I hear you. And I guess my ideal would have to be my ideal. Your ideal might not be mine. But what would your ideal for you be? In listening to a talk on meditation and the Kabbalah and trying to, find your own path.
Absolutely. So I'm going to try very hard to answer your question, and if I'm missing it in any way, just let me know. We can do a little back and forth. But essentially, the question was really intention is with a talk like this. The whole point of this is actually for everybody, hopefully, to have space to come in with whatever it is you're coming in with, whether it's some very specific goal or intention, you want to have resolution in some specific area, or if you're coming in with skepticism. I really feel planted in the importance of including all that is. So whatever experience you're having or anybody's having individually, please have it. Include that. We're going to do a meditation actually that has everything to do with this, which is actually called inviting everything in. So my ideal, from the word idea, or where idealism comes from, is probably very different than yours. And we each need to have our space to feel what that is and be in touch with what that is. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
So my question is this: what is the difference between regular meditation, like Buddhist meditation, and Jewish Kabbalistic meditation? Because I know I've been doing that for a couple of years now. Every Sunday morning, I'm giving it up this morning. I just do meditation, and what they train us is just to sit quietly and let the mind go, because the thoughts are in and out, right? And then you just count your breath, you focus on the breathing so that you can focus on something instead of bad thinking. I'm very interested, always have been, about Jewish Kabbalah. Kabbalah is for me terrific. I took it for 10 years. I love everything about it. But so when we do Jewish meditation, Kabbalistic meditation, what is that exactly?
Okay. So another great question. The question is, what's the difference between Buddhist meditation or other forms of meditation and Kabbalistic meditation? So I want to make myself as transparent as possible by saying I don't consider myself an expert in meditation or Jewish meditation. My seat is as a Kabbalistic healer. And we include these meditations, which are Kabbalistically informed, which, by the way, are also Buddhist informed. Okay, so I don't think I'd be the best person to draw some, comprehensive distinction between meditation and Kabbalistic meditation. What I will say as a Kabbalistic healer, and the way we work with the meditations, is we're really working deeply and personally from a healing perspective. A person comes in the way a session kind of looks, a person comes in with whatever it is that's on their heart, on their mind, and we are directly speaking to the quality of shatteredness. And it's hard to explain because there's a lot of depth to this, but we're essentially relating to a particular quality of the shatteredness, and it's informed by the Kabbalistic tree of life. We really work with the Kabbalistic tree of life in Kabbalistic healing. Okay, there's a series of 16 main meditations and healings that we work with. So it's the difference between meditation and Kabbalistic healing, I'd say, is what I can speak to. Okay. Any great questions? You are all so fully present here bringing these questions. I appreciate that. So I'm going to invite everybody into one final meditation, okay, one final participatory piece, and then walk you through that, and I will leave it open for comments on the exercise, general questions, and then I'll have some closing remarks, okay? So this final meditation, as I mentioned before, is called Inviting Everything In. I invite you to apply this as a specific practice. I also invite you to apply this as a way of being and an intention in life. And I will say I've actually personally been working very deeply and a great deal with this, inviting everything in. And it's been very to say the least. I'd say transformative if we're going to use big words. So we'll go right back to sitting in your seat, just finding your own presence, your own center. Silently be with your breathing for a few moments. Your intention in this meditation is to invite everything in. All the parts of yourself. The small, frightened parts. The courageous parts. The selfish parts. The devoted parts. Say to yourself, you, the selfish one, come in and be here. You, the one who forgets to be kind to yourself, come in, be here. You, the one who remembers God, the wholeness of reality, from time to time, please come in. Whatever comes into your mind or heart, whether it is some form of suffering or some insight, it does not matter. Simply recognize it and invite it in. Just sit quietly. Breathe for a few moments. And take note of what appears. And when you're ready, on your own time, take 3 good deep breaths. And with each breath, you can allow yourself to come more fully back into the room. You can follow my voice. 3 good deep breaths. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Stretch if you need to. Nobody has to share out loud, but I am just going to ask how that was, and I'm going to take a look around the room just to see how that was for people. Anybody ready for a good nap? I'm actually going to come back to our goal of living well and fully present. Again, as meaning finding salvation and wholeness in the here and now, including all of who we are and essentially all that is here in front of us right now, to heal not only ourselves, but truly towards the healing of the world itself. I'm going to bring a Jewish quote. He who heals one soul, it is as if he heals a whole world. And I very much believe that starts with ourselves. Okay? So thank you so much for being with me, for participating, for welcoming me. I told you I felt that welcome. I'm going to conclude my remarks and open up the floor should anybody have any other questions or comments for that matter.
So I'd like to know, because I'm intrigued by the meditation generally and your your type of meditation. Where do these 16 meditations come from? How do they exist? That's one question. And then second, how do you actually work as a psychotherapist? So do you do meditations with your client, patients? Do you do talking therapy? How does it actually work?
Okay, so coming back to the beginning part of that question, or two questions. Where do these 16 meditations come from? And then how do I personally work in a session, say, as a healer, as a therapist? So I want to begin by saying these meditations that we use as Kabbalistic healers, again, are founded on 4 years of in-depth, integrative, experiential teaching and work. And they're really, they are meditations, but they are healings. So I would say one big difference in the definition of a meditation and a healing is meditation is very much within our own boundary, our own body. The healings are in a intersubjective context, meaning two people together. It's really in the relational context and relational paradigm. Okay, that's really the vehicle for it. These are informed by the Kabbalistic tree of life and how we work with the 10 essential qualities, one of them being Chesed, and how we use them in our relationship with the wholeness of a person. Okay, and we could even say, if we want to get a little more absolute about it, the way we relate to the wholeness of a person is the same way we relate to the wholeness of reality. And the idea of the Kabbalistic tree of life is that it's sort of like a blueprint or a map for all of reality, believing that you could use different narratives, but from the creation narrative, God created the world based on this core essential map, so to speak. Okay? Then, just from a really practical level of how I work or how this healing might work, because I want people to be able to relate to this on whatever personal level you relate to it. We all bring ourselves into any relationship, hopefully as fully as possible. So me as a therapist, as a person, I'm bringing in my personal experience, obviously, and I'm bringing in the training I've had. My particular training is in family therapy, hypnosis, adolescent training, and Kabbalistic healing. So it looks a lot like a regular psychotherapy session, maybe talk therapy. The way I hold myself in the room, my personal experience is different as a Kabbalistic healer than as a psychotherapist. My psychotherapeutic training is a bit more intellectual and analytical. I tend to actually steer myself away from that and really pay attention to my body, imagery that comes to me, whatever's present in the room, and really try and include that and work with it. I do sometimes do active meditations with people. I sometimes do healings with people, which are essentially, they're silent. The healings are silent, primarily. So a person may choose to lay down on the couch and, I'll sit in my chair and do my thing, or they sit across from me, whatever is comfortable for them. Okay, and some folks, I try to be really sensitive to this. Some folks don't feel so comfortable in the silence of a healing. So if that's going to bring up a lot of anxiety for somebody, I'm not going to do that in that moment. We'll work in a different way that might look a little bit more like just talking and being in relationship in that way. Okay? Good questions. Thank you. Okay.
So I'm going through this in my mind as well. I'm trying to qualify the distinctive differences in terms of what you presented today. And so I'm just going to say something and you tell me if I'm correct. That in the way that we look at the world and changing ourselves is typically, traditionally, not Jewish traditionally, but traditionally, a way of we have to fix ourselves to get better, to change something that's broken, that's wrong, that's painful, that's creating suffering, that's wrong, and that if we only, whether
change that, get better, then we'll get to be with God or be happy or fulfill ourselves. And what your perspective is that we are already whole, but we need to include the broken parts, the pain and suffering into our experience. And so the work is different. It's not getting rid of something, it's integrating it and learning that is part of life, and then how to cope with that better, which will help us to feel that wholeness. Is that correct?
I think that's excellent. I think as we're talking, and I think that's really excellent, so I hope everybody heard that, because that was so well integrated and well put together. Yes, so many people come into self-help and change thinking there's something wrong with me. I want to learn the tools to fix myself. And there is this distinct difference that we are saying, and I really feel this is the Jewish perspective, and anybody who reads my book, this is like the thesis of every essay. We are intrinsically whole, and through life, through pain, through wounding, we forget that. And the experience of that is often we send parts of ourselves like into hiding. That's what repression looks like. Sometimes maybe we won't think of something consciously, but it becomes a physical symptom or pain, for example. And the whole concept of healing is to include that, allow that in, to allow our wholeness to exist. I think we're often given the message at young ages that we're not allowed to exist exactly as we are, because it might be inconvenient in some way. Okay, even with the best parenting, this happens. So it's the idea that we can fully exist as we are, and through that, we are a healing presence. We heal the world that way. We really do. Okay. So is there anything else I can clarify or general questions?
I was wondering in your work if you do anything with the unconscious?
The unconscious? So I do. From the non-dual perspective, the idea of conscious and unconscious, like when the conscious is present, the unconscious is present too. So we're always working with the whole of the person, keeping in mind, and in an applied way, keeping in mind that which might not be apparent, okay, or that which might be hidden. I will say in a more direct way, the hypnosis training that I've done is all about the unconscious.
Any dream work? Do you do that as well?
I don't do specific dream work, but I include that and see where it takes us. I know that there are schools of thought and there are modalities out there that are very more regimented and very specific. I tend to not go towards that, but certainly include dreams. Absolutely. Okay?
Yeah, I just want to say that unquestionably, but I could see where Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism and Judaism in general could be such a terrific tool. You know, like even when I do the meditation Buddhist style, I still fall back on what I know from that, and it gives me such a lift. So it's also positive. Everything in the Jewish mysticism is really positive. So man is beautiful, he's perfect, you know. And then we come in and well, this is wrong and this is wrong, I'm too fat, I'm too big, I'm too small, and all of that. We always find fault in ourselves. And the Jewish mysticism says, no, God created you like this, and to go back to that. So I could see where it could be a perfect tool to help people in the way that you're doing. It's wonderful.
Absolutely, and part of what I'm hearing is what I think is your direct contact in experiencing what it is to come into contact with your own personal wholeness.
Yeah.
So not just in theory, but you've sat in that seat, you know what it feels like.
Each one of us has this capability.
It's who we are.
That's how God made us.
Remember it, yep. So you can come home from this, people ask how it was, and you just tell them, I don't know, apparently I'm already perfect.
Just a comment, I want to thank you so much because we've been
of Buddhist meditation and been very open to it. But I truly enjoyed today your beginning and planting ideas that relate to a Jewish view. And when you began with life is here, and it's like a translation of mindfulness. But I'm so glad to have uncovered it, and I want to know more. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm just going to add to that. This is feedback that I've gotten. I am keeping in mind the time. I have gotten feedback from people who have maybe practiced some form of meditation or mindfulness where they might find a distinction in this. Sometimes, not that this is the intention, but the way mindfulness can be taught can be, sit and kind of watch your thoughts go by without judgment. And, if you kind of take a step back, if you even use that sentence, watch your thoughts go by without judgment, we're kind of excluding something, almost like we're judging the judgment. It's true. And in this work, it's radical in the sense that we include all that is, and the container just gets wider and wider and wider. Okay? And it is as infinite as Chesed.
Thank you very much.